Parmenter, the chair of the Berlin, Mass. Social Justice Network, and I welcome you all, and I thank you all for coming. We are so thrilled this year, despite the weather, to have you all here and to get this started. We're going to have Misty Dawn Shelley, the minister of First Parish Church, do our invocation now, and then we'll have a quick speaker, and then back to the music.
So welcome, everyone. Some of you have gone inside, which is also okay with this drizzly weather. It looks like a great turnout. Oh, look, Victoria's here. Sorry. So as Holly mentioned, I'm Reverend Misty Dawn Shelley. I have the great privilege of serving the people who call First Parish Church their spiritual home. And my task here is to sort of just call us into this moment with some opening words. Calling on all that is holy, let us remember this day as a day of celebration. Here may you find a warm greeting, a kind word. Here may you witness a community of support, the pulse of liberation, and a vision of hope. Here may you discover a song to sing, a rhythm to dance with, because it's going to be upstairs, and perhaps even a hand to hold. This is a day of celebration, a celebration of the many paths many of us travel to find equity, to search for truth, to affirm freedom. A day of celebrating the different beliefs that affirm we are people tasked with hope through service and support. And to celebrate this beautiful, bountiful web woven of these paths and beliefs that indeed make a promise to this community to be stronger together. Let us celebrate this day and all days in the center of Berlin.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. And I want to thank the Berlin Social Justice Network for hosting this Juneteenth celebration and recognition. I want to thank Misty and First Parish Church for allowing the use of your lawn and your space to have this conversation today. It's so important. In 2 weeks from now, we will celebrate the freedom of our nation in 1776. But we know that the reality that promise of freedom did not reach enslaved people until 1865 in Galveston, Texas on Juneteenth, which we recognize today. And we know that journey towards freedom is a journey that we are still on today. Even in this moment when forces of darkness in the world seek to roll back freedoms, seek to roll back equity, that it is only through deliberate intention, through deliberate action, that we not only preserve the freedoms that we gain, but that we continue on that journey to free our world of oppression that exists, to free our world of marginalization that still exists, to free our world of hatred and disparities that still exist. So that work goes on, and I am grateful to the community in Berlin who here today is continuing that conversation, continuing that, putting those words in action, and I look forward to continuing with you on that journey towards true freedom for every member of our community. So thank you so much.
Berlin's Community Equity and Justice Celebration. As you know, this also corresponds to Juneteenth. Whenever I hear the story of Juneteenth happening when it did in the middle of 1865 after the Civil War, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation and 4 years after the federal law that allowed escaped slaves to be treated as contraband and not returned to their owners. And 6 months before the passage of the 13th Amendment, whenever I hear that story, I think it's a celebration of when people in Galveston finally got the memo that they were free, but also that this is a continuing progress toward freedom. At the time of the original Juneteenth, slavery was perfectly legal and unimpeded still in the states of Kentucky and Delaware, and continued to be so for another 6 months. But I think we're fortunate to live in a state and to have representatives who got the memo and who understand the importance of the continuing development of this community and this society toward equity and social justice. So I'd like to begin by introducing Megan Kilcoyne, and then who is our state representative, and then Paul DiPaolo from the Governor's Council will be speaking to us as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. For those that don't know me, my name is Meg Kilcoyne. I'm state representative for the 12th Worcester District that includes the town of Berlin. And this is, I believe, my third Juneteenth celebration that I've had the privilege to attend here in town. And honestly, I'm just so grateful that this is a growing annual event, because I think it highlights the importance and the continued work that we all need to do. Many of our holidays, we see them as a time for celebration, as a time to get work off, to maybe spend time with your families, and all that's wonderful, and we absolutely should do that. But holidays are also there so we don't forget our history, so we don't forget where we came from. I think in recent years, we're unfortunately seeing a conflation of patriotism with, frankly, nationalism. And patriotism to me means that you can still love your country, but recognize that it stands on the shoulders of people that fought for the freedoms we enjoy, that fought for their entire lives and never got to live to see the fruits of their labor. Many of those fruits that we enjoy here today. Patriotism also means that within the United States, we still are not done. The work is still unfinished of truly creating a society that is equal, of creating a society where everyone is truly free, where everybody that can live in dignity. I think what's so significant about Juneteenth is that, we often, when we hear the history of the Civil War, of the history of slavery, it's couched as Abraham Lincoln having given the slaves their freedom, but that's not true. Freedom wasn't given by President Lincoln to anybody. The Emancipation Proclamation was the result of those that had fought for the truth and dignity of the lives that they lived, that fought for humanity and for the belief that this nation that they lived in could do better, that there could be a better future for them and their children and their descendants. The freedom of Black people in America was fought for by Black people and won by Black people and those that were their allies. So I think this Juneteenth, for me, I want to remember that history. I want to remember the fact that we stand on the shoulders that came before us. And I know for myself, there's still so much work to do to continue to honor their legacy and to honor the history of this country. I think that we should take this time to look forward and to work together to continue the fight that began so many generations ago, and hopefully create a better future, not just for us, but for those that came after us. I'm honored to be able to share this work with Senator Kennedy and the legislature, where we, I know, take that sentiment with us every day at the State House to try to do what we can and use our limited influence and power and our voice to help marginalized communities in our area, in our district, and create a better community for all. But I also have the privilege today of introducing my other colleague in government, Paul DiPaolo, who serves on the Governor's Council, who also does incredibly important work in ensuring that our justice system is truly working for the people and is truly just and fair and right, and he does great work. I'm honored to be able to work with him in government, and you're going to hear from him right now.
Thank you, Rep. Kilcoyne. We're lucky in these communities to have a rep like you who brings your perspective every day to the State House. We're so excited to have you. Thank you all the groups and the organizations who I've had a chance to talk to so far for the work you're doing in our communities. I know it makes a tremendous difference. And today, I look behind me and I see the Pride flag. It is Pride Month. It's important to remember that here in Massachusetts, we ushered in the era of love meaning love and the ability to marry whoever you choose. And we're grateful for that, but we know that LGBTQ rights continue to be something that we need to fight for, especially for our LGBTQ youth who are facing a lot of difficult circumstances and not necessarily always being welcomed and helped in our schools and in our court system. As far as Juneteenth, we are here to celebrate. We have a lot to be proud of in Massachusetts, but we're here because we know there's so much more work to do. Massachusetts continues to have the highest Latino incarceration rate in the nation. We continue to have the 14th highest Black incarceration rate in the nation. We have documented that the color of your skin impacts the duration of the sentencing you receive in our criminal courts. A Black defendant, similarly situated with a similar background to a white defendant, depending on the charge, is going to sit in a cage for 45 to 180 days longer than that white defendant. That means we're paying 90 grand a year to keep someone in a cage because of the color of their skin. These are the issues we need to continue to keep in our mind and continue to working with. But the folks here today and the folks who are working for us in government make me optimistic that the long arc of history is bending towards freedom, equality, and inclusivity. So with that, I want to thank you for your time. And I have the honor of introducing Barbara Palomir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, I am a member of the board of the committee of the social justice group here in Berlin, and it is my great honor to be asked to introduce and to welcome Dr. Ann Warfield Rawls, our keynote speaker. And I am so impressed when I hear our representatives speak of their commitment to the work in which we are all involved. I'm very impressed and so exhilarated because I think that we are in good hands. We are in good hands. Now, I want to speak to you about Anne. Anne is professor and chair of the Department of Sociology at Bentley University. I met her there many years ago. In fact, I came earlier. I was in the English department. Anne specializes in race, racism, exclusion, and emancipation scholarship. Anne has taught, written, and published broadly in this area for over 50 years. Let me repeat. She has taught, written, and published broadly in this area for over 50 years. She is an ally of allies. Let us give a round of applause for her. She has kept up the good fight, and that is her spirit. She never gives in, and she knows in the end that we are on the right path, going in the right direction. Anne is an American sociologist affiliated with the University of Siegen, Germany, as professor of interaction work and information in the Center for Media Corporation, and she is the director of the Garfinkel Archive. Her research draws extensively on the work of marginalized Black and Jewish scholars, elaborating on the argument that equality is needed for coherent practices in diverse spaces. Anne's Emancipation Scholarship focuses on perspectives often overlooked or dismissed by mainstream scholars, which reveal hidden aspects of racism in our society. Anne has published numerous articles on this subject, and her best selling book, Tacit Racism, was published in 2020. It is time that we support our white allies as they speak out because they have also paid the cost. They have been loyal, they have stood the test. And we are very proud to have Professor Anne Rawls speak to us today. And her topic is the importance of Black labor, equality, and Juneteenth. Let me repeat. Her topic is the importance of Black labor, equality, and Juneteenth. And it gives me great pleasure to honor our great ally, Dr. Anne Warfield Rawls.
What is Juneteenth? And what is it about the occasion that makes it a celebration for all Americans? In raising these two questions, I hope to confront you with some essential history and sociology about the important role played by the labor of Black Americans in building this country and the various ways in which a persistent lack of racial equality has resulted in that labor being stolen, suppressed, and misrepresented. With regard to the first question, what is Juneteenth? It is both a celebration and a warning, as I've heard several of the prior speakers point out. Juneteenth was first celebrated among African Americans in Texas before spreading throughout the U.S. This commemoration of the day in 1865, when news that slavery had finally ended reached Texas, had been formally recognized by all U.S. states in some form by 1938. The first Juneteenth was celebrated the very next year, 1866, with food, music, and pageants of various kinds. Juneteenth has been a federal holiday in the U.S. since June 17, 2021. On January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation had officially freed enslaved people in those states which had joined what government documents at the time referred to as the so-called Confederacy. However, it was not until Union soldiers, led by Major General Gordon Granger, landed in Galveston, Texas on June 19th that year, with the news that General Lee had surrendered and that Civil War was over, that enslaved people in Texas finally learned that they had been legally free for over 2 years. Even after the news arrived, enslaved people were only able to exercise their freedom in those parts of Texas where the presence of the Union Army was strong enough to force white enslavers to comply. Thus, Juneteenth is also a warning that although the labor of Black Americans played an essential role in the economic and political rise of the United States, and U.S. law now guarantees the freedom of that labor, the temptation to preserve hierarchies of race, class, and gender that allow some to profit from the stolen labor of others is strong even today. When people with power and privilege can find ways to arrogate more to themselves, it seems they almost always try. With regard to the second question, what makes Juneteenth a celebration for all Americans? I'm going to talk a bit about Texas and some things that most of us assume that turn out not to be true. It is particularly fitting that the origin of the celebration of Juneteenth is the end of slavery in Texas, because the situation in Texas with regard to slavery rather uniquely represents the practice and interests of slavery throughout the United States. This is surprising to many people because there is a widespread misperception that racialized slavery only benefited the South. But this is not so. The entire US economy and its social and political structure were shaped by slavery. Northern businesses, including shipping, banking, and international trade, were all heavily invested in slavery. Slavery also shaped accounting, management, and finance, modern disciplines, which I teach a course on capitalism and slavery at Bentley University to instruct students on. The capital that fueled the transition to industrialism by United States and Western Europe was generated by slavery, not by the greater intelligence or entrepreneurial genius of Westerners. And it was fueled by cotton and its profits in particular. In fact, the interests of Northern banks and Wall Street financiers in the profits of slavery were so strong that on January 7th, 1861, New York City Mayor Fernando Wood suggested that this important northern city should join the southern states in seceding from the Union, a proposal that was seriously debated. When Juneteenth came to Texas, it was not only the largest slave state and the last to come under Union control, but since 1862, which things had started turning against the Southern Army, slave owners have been fleeing to Texas with their slaves in an attempt to retain control of what they considered their property. One account at the time said it looked like everyone was fleeing to Texas. That both the beginning and the end of slavery in Texas played a pivotal role in the larger American story makes Juneteenth and what it represents a part of U.S. history that every American should become familiar with, but that very few know. As Annette Gordon Reed said in her book On Juneteenth, people are often quick to insist that the past is not relevant to the present when the subjects of racialized slavery, Black labor, and equality come up. But those same people often insist that we do things like remembering the Alamo and celebrating local historical figures and symbols that are steeped in slavery. When we look more closely at the history of Texas, we see why this matters. When we remember the Alamo, but resist talking about slavery, or consider Juneteenth without considering the origins of Texas in the illegal activities of American immigrant slavers in Mexico, we fall into a set of unconscious contradictions. Americans only went to Texas in the first place in the 1820s because they were looking for land on which to grow cotton with slave labor. Adjacent lands in Louisiana and Mississippi that were formerly home to Cherokee, Choctaw, and other peoples who had been massacred and driven out to make way for white Americans had quickly been turned into cotton plantations fueled by slave labor between 1810 and 1820. For newcomers with a desire to become rich from enslaved Black labor, the vast lands next door in Mexico, what is now Texas, beckoned strongly. Spain and France had not been as successful as England in encouraging Europeans to colonize their territories in North America, leaving French Louisiana Purchase and the part of Mexico that contained what is now Texas with relatively few European settlers. This matters because it left the land there looking from a European perspective like it was empty. There were, of course, many Mexicans, Tejanos, and indigenous peoples living there. They had always lived there. It was their land. But because European settlers were not claiming that that land belonged to them, it was, from a European or white American perspective, up for grabs. After the Mexican Revolution ended in 1824, immigrants from the US who organized themselves into colonies began to arrive. Because the first president of Mexico, Guadalupe Victoria, was eager for settlers to emigrate from the US and colonize Mexican land, these American immigrants were welcomed at first. On 24 March 1825, the Mexican Congress even passed a law formally encouraging colonization. The law gave settlers land, privileges, and exemption from taxes. There was only one problem. Mexico was strongly anti-slavery, and Mexican law prohibited the importation of enslaved people. Many Americans entered Mexico and communities quickly formed. However, they disobeyed the law against importing enslaved people, as their intention was to get rich by organizing plantations around slave labor, as had been done in Louisiana and Mississippi. By employing various deceptions, they were able at first to convince the Mexican government that their slaves were contract laborers. But the deception did not hold up to close scrutiny, and the Mexican government began sending troops to force the immigrants to free their slaves. In 1826, one of the new colonies rebelled and attempted to declare its independence from Mexico, calling itself the Republic of Fredonia. That rebellion was quickly quelled by Mexican troops. As a direct result, however, the Mexican government began a crackdown of the other colonies, and President Victoria authorized an extensive expedition to inspect other immigrant settlements for evidence of slavery. The inspection included the settlement led by Samuel F. Austin, often called the father of Texas. Reports from this inspection that the American immigrants were illegally practicing slavery led to new laws on 6 April 1830, severely restricting immigration to Mexican Texas and increasing military pressure on the colony led by Austin to stop practicing slavery in Mexico. The second president of Mexico, Vicente Guerrero, formally abolished slavery throughout Mexico in 1829. Americans had always been forbidden to bring slaves with them into Mexico, but now the practice of slavery was illegal by anyone, anywhere in Mexico. Although fully understanding Mexican law, colonies of Americans continued immigrating illegally to Mexico with their slaves, daring the Mexican government to do something about it. When Mexico sent troops to force the American immigrants to either end slavery or leave, they engaged in armed rebellion against the government of the country they had entered illegally. The Battle of the Alamo from February 23rd to March 6, 1836, which the Americans lost, marked the culmination of these illegal actions against Mexico. Unfortunately, the loss at the Alamo only inspired more American settlers to fight, and on April 23rd, 1836, they managed to defeat the Mexican government at the Battle of San Jacinto and force it to cede Texas. This is what remembering the Alamo is all about, preserving slavery. For 9 years after Mexico ceded Texas, it existed as an independent territory in which the practice of slavery thrived. Then in 1845, facing repeated efforts by Mexico to gain back its territory and end the practice of slavery there, Texas joined with the U.S., hoping that the deep U.S. investment in slavery would protect slavery in Texas. It worked for another 20 years. The whole American history of Texas is about slavery. More than any other state, everything that happened from the first point of immigration in the 1820s was done to promote and preserve slavery. Today, Texas stands firmly against Today, Texas stands firmly against teaching this history, and the Battle of the Alamo is still proudly remembered as a stand for freedom against a tyrannical Mexican government that was trying to take away the rights of citizens. The truth, however, is that the rights those Texas slavers, illegal immigrants under Mexican law, were fighting to protect were the right to hold people in bondage, to trade in human beings, and get rich from stealing the labor of enslaved Black Americans. The so-called tyrannical Mexican government was trying to stop slavery by immigrants acting illegally in its own territory. When the news came on Juneteenth that enslaved people in Texas were finally free, it put an end to all of that, representing both the end of slavery in the United States and the coming transition to new forms of wage labor, also mentioned in General Gordon's announcement on Juneteenth. These new forms of labor would extend racial inequalities with regard to Black labor into the present. Refusing to tell this history and continuing to remember the Alamo as a battle for freedom not only enables assumptions and practices that supported slavery to continue shaping how we understand the present, it also fosters a warped picture of the relationship between the United States and Mexico today, when we accuse Mexico, which was forced to cede its territory to illegal immigrants and criminals from the United States, of violating our border. Freedom and equality, justice, in a word, are hard ideals for any people anywhere to achieve. And we need reminders like Juneteenth that staying on course to accomplish these goals requires constant vigilance, courage, and self-examination regarding what we take for granted in everyday life.
Let's hear it for our keynote speaker. You have heard Ann Warfield Rawls speak on Juneteenth. You cannot say you did not hear. You cannot say you did not know, because now you know. You know what the Alamo means. You know how slavery got to Texas. You know the riches that developed there. You know that much of the wealth that brought in the Industrial Revolution were on the backs of the people who built that wealth with their free labor through slavery. So now you know, and we give such great thanks to allies like Ann Warfield Rawls, who has spent over 50 years writing, researching, and publishing about slavery, inequalities, the need for change, and the call for a better life for all of us, because none of us will be free until all of us are free. Thank you. And thank you, Anne. Thank you. We love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. And Dr. Rawls, thank you so much for speaking here today. We are here to celebrate the community and equity and justice and Juneteenth, because Juneteenth is a celebration. And we are offering food and music, and we want you to stick around and check out all the different booths, some inside, some outside. And thank you to everyone who's here. And I know Meg Kilcoyne said to me she's disappointed
that this was the only Juneteenth event on her schedule this year. And she will be here next year and every year. And I hope you all will be here with us too. Thank you so much.